Welcome back to the Real News Network, coming to you from our studio in Washington, D.C. We're talking to Gareth Porter. He's an investigative journalist and historian. Thanks for joining us again, Gareth. So we're talking about the war in Afghanistan and President Obama's new policy, we're told, the appointment of General McChrystal. We're told he's an expert in counterinsurgency, and this will represent a smarter, better way to fight the war. So what do you make of that?
Well, it's very interesting, the way in which McChrystal was presented to the U.S. public and to the media. Robert Gates suggested that this is a guy who is very qualified to move into this position in Afghanistan because he has this great background in counterinsurgency, whereas in fact this man has never had anything to do with real counterinsurgency in the sense of programs that are aimed at winning over the population. The supposed approach that the Obama administration has taken through, of course, General Petraeus and the guy who wrote the Army Manual on counterinsurgency. The fact is that, of course, McChrystal has only been involved in targeted killings, not on anything having to do with the civilian population.
Which the strategy is supposed to be seize and hold areas, and then you bring back electricity and water services
to protect
and schools.
The population and provide services and political programs that will win over the population, not to focus primarily on the enemy.
Which is what President Obama announced in his Afghan policy, which people have called a civilian surge.
That's right.
You're saying that McChrystal has never had experience with a civilian surge.
No experience whatsoever. He was, for 5 years, head of this Joint Command, which only did targeted killing, and then went to the Joint Staff.
So what is a policy that would work? You've been investigating and talking to a former CIA bureau chief in Kabul, Graham Fuller, who says the best thing to do would either get out or pull back. What's that? Yeah,
Graham Fuller, who was the CIA station chief in Kabul during the U.S. support for the Afghan jihadi movement against the Soviets, he now believes very strongly that the United States has to get out, that there is no way the United States is going to be able to win in Afghanistan, no way they can win in Pakistan either, that the United States has no understanding of the forces it has unleashed in Afghanistan, does not understand the Pashtun population, which it has to work with, win over, is simply not equipped to do it based on his experience and observation over the last 25 years or so. I think he's very credible as somebody who has observed and participated in Afghan affairs over the years.
The counter-argument you would get from the Obama administration and others is that if that happens, then the Taliban retake national control of Afghanistan and then offer a new base again to al-Qaeda as they did before and so on.
Well, one of the approaches that probably makes sense rationally is for the United States to support a movement to create a Pashtunistan, combining the Pashtun populations of Pakistan on one side and Afghanistan on the other, giving them a stake in their own political system. Let them decide what their fate will be, and the argument, I think, makes some sense that they're much more likely to support their own interests rather than the interests of al-Qaeda under those circumstances, particularly if the United States leaves them alone. The other way in which I think the United States could contribute to a solution which would serve everyone's interests outside of Afghanistan, particularly our own interests, is, and in the interest of the Afghans themselves, is to support the Saudi initiative to try to negotiate with Taliban leadership, Mullah Omar and his own leadership, to separate them from al-Qaeda, to get them to agree that they will not let al-Qaeda have any role in Afghanistan if the United States and NATO are willing to leave them alone. I think that's a solution that would serve the interests that Obama has identified as the real reason the United States is in Afghanistan much more effectively than what the United States is doing.
So explain a little further. What is the Saudi proposal?
What the Saudis are actually doing, they're not simply proposing it, they're trying to work diplomatically, politically, through their contacts, which, as you well know, they have historically had very close contacts with the Taliban leadership, which has...
Apparently they finance most of the schools, Taliban madrasas in Pakistan.
They certainly have provided financial support in the past both during the war against the Soviets and since then, and are one of the only two major countries, foreign countries, which have actually recognized the Taliban regime in the past.
Other being Pakistan.
Exactly. So they have credibility, they have reasonably good relations with Mullah Omar and the Taliban leadership. So the idea is for them to work directly through commanders in the field, actual Taliban commanders in the field, and then work their way up to the top level of the Taliban and persuade the Taliban to reach an agreement that they would reject any relationship, ongoing relationship, after the Americans and the NATO forces leave Afghanistan. That would be the quid pro quo.
And in other words, give them southern Afghanistan.
Well, I think in effect it means that if they're the strongest force, they would undoubtedly be able to take power in Afghanistan. That would be the implication of it, at least as we understand the balance of forces.
But it couldn't be just Afghanistan. If the Taliban come back and try to take national power, we have the beginning of a new Afghan civil war, because the North is not going to accept Pashtun control of Afghanistan.
Well, there might be continued fighting. There's no question that that's a possibility, yes. But the United States would not necessarily have to be part of that war.
That would be rather interesting to see a war the United States not part of.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, Gareth.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington, there's a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.